So Housing New York, as you've heard this morning, is a comprehensive plan to build and preserve 200,000 units. And the main thrust of the plan is really creating diverse neighborhoods and providing housing for a range of different incomes. Some of the key facets, so this, I want you guys to notice how this was language that's kind of stock language that was written to talk about the plan in general, but so much of it is infused with the kind of supportive housing work that we do here that it's been sort of, I didn't change this very much because I wanted people to see how just the general housing language that we talk to the public at large and to the affordable housing community at large really does apply to the supportive housing world so clearly, which has been great to see in this transition. So a huge focus between the gap between rents and incomes, a recognition that a high rent burden is a huge barrier in New York City to affordability. The 55% of rental households are rent burdened, and 30% are extremely rent burdened. A recognition that there's insufficient housing production across the board for all different levels, income levels in the city. A limited supply of affordable units, and then on top of which we have a tremendous population growth, which is going to exacerbate all those other factors. So these are some of the guiding principles. I'm not going to read each one, but I think focusing on addressing the changing demographics of who we serve, so supportive housing is a big piece of that, and then leveraging favorable markets and increasing capital funding for housing are both going to be key cornerstones to increasing supportive housing under the mayor's new plan. So of the 5 chapters in the plan, one of them was exclusively devoted to housing for special needs populations, including the homeless, supportive housing, and seniors. So we're going to focus a little bit more about those populations specifically here. We talk about homeless individuals and families, so not everybody who's in the shelter system requires supportive housing specifically, but we do need to create a little bit more of a continuum where it's not just put somebody in a unit unassisted from a homeless shelter or supportive housing with thousands of dollars worth of services. We need to create more of a continuum and find something in between. Expand supportive housing specifically, and we had a tremendous win, I think, this morning that we heard from the governor's office, so that was really exciting and totally unexpected, even to those of us who thought we knew what to expect from the panel this morning. Focus more on senior housing options and ensure accessible housing for individuals with disabilities. The financing tools that we've been talking about are through our city's tax incentives, identifying some new funding streams, which we got a huge leg up this morning when we heard about the settlement money going to a future New York agreement. Increasing private leverage, which I'm going to talk about more, that's going to be a little bit new in the supportive housing world. Leveraging public-private and philanthropic partnerships, which I think this community has always been a great leader in terms of that. And then reevaluate HPD and HDC programs to stretch our subsidy dollars even further. So we did get a great boost in our capital budget this year, supportive housing in particular, but it's still not going to catch up to do the tremendous growth in the number of units that we're planning on doing without leveraging still more money from other places. So we're going to come up with some innovative ways to do that. The proposed city investment is $8.2 billion with a total development cost of over $41 billion. It's 60% preservation and 40% new construction. And as the supportive housing, the thousands of units of supportive housing that we've done already in the city start to age, we're a tremendous part of the city's Year 15 program, where there's another panel later today about the Year 15 program. We're starting to see supportive housing preservation as an increasingly big part of our portfolio. And then the exciting thing for the supportive housing world also is a 200% increase in the extremely low income units. So some of that will have to be funded through rental assistance, but we're also hoping that some of that can be funded just through underwriting the deals so that we're not as heavily reliant on rental assistance as we have been in the past. So this slide I kept in here because the mayor did not know he was talking about supportive housing when he made this quote, but it just goes to show you how suffused the messages that we've been sending about diversity and civil rights for people with disabilities and making sure that everybody has a home here in New York City has really been, suffused in everything that this administration has been saying. So here we're talking about supportive housing and without even really realizing that that's specifically what we're saying. So that was an exciting comment that he made on the day of the launch of the Housing New York plan. So to get to supportive housing specifically, this is a chart that shows what the leverage ratio has been for supportive housing over the years. So as you can see, from 2004 to 2012, we're hovering around 1.5. So for every dollar that the supportive housing loan program that I run put in to a project, we leveraged about $1.50 from other funding sources, some of which are here in the room, state partners, private dollars, tax credits, things like that. In 2013, we tried something new. We brought in additional bond financing. We allowed people to partner with private developers, and then really just placed more of a focus on bringing other people's money into these deals and not just focusing on our little niche supportive housing loan program in OMH and HHAP world. So that allowed us to increase our leverage ratio substantially up to 3.39. I think my mandate going forward from this administration has been to really keep that number going higher and higher. So we're going to see more and more innovative strategies, and we're going to need your help figuring out new ways to create additional leverage from other sources. So here's some of the models, old and new, that we've been talking about. We'll still probably do a lot of the traditional 9% plus supportive housing loan program deals that many of you are familiar with. And then, as you saw in the last slide, we are working more closely with HDC to get tax-exempt bonds for the LAMP program, and we'll hear about a couple case studies later on in the panel about using that model. One that we haven't done yet, but we're going to start piloting this summer, is around using 9% tax credits plus supportive housing loan program, but also leveraging conventional debt on the permanent phase. So that's something that we haven't done historically, but we're using debt on the bond deals, and that's been very successful, and we've seen a lot of banks and lenders being interested in that type of investment, and so we think we're going to expand that to the 9% deals as well. And then we've been partnering very closely with HFA and the MRT world. That's been a really great partnership. We've been working very much more closely with the state and the MRT, and working out of the medical lens that Department of Health has been a really interesting kind of mix of cultures, and we've been figuring out how to work together even better. On the preservation side, we've done a couple of different RAD conversions in special needs housing. We are very reliant, as you all know, on federal rental assistance. So the RAD program has been a uniquely good fit for the supportive housing program, and we've done a couple of those projects with conventional debt as well. Our year 15 program, we see more and more of our projects aging, and we reposition them at year 15 and do sort of a financial and physical check-in to make sure that the buildings are in good shape, and both financially and physically. And then the standard SHLP model, we've done a couple of preservation deals with that. We call ourselves the supportive housing loan program now, but when we were originally conceived of in the early 90s, we were the SRO loan program because we were primarily focused on SRO preservation as opposed to new construction. So we try to get back to our roots and do some preservation deals from time to time whenever we can. And then some of the new models in new construction, we hope to increasingly use the HDC LAMP program for supportive housing, both with SHLP and through the other standard affordable housing sources. And then last year we did our first inclusionary supportive housing program, where a private developer built a building, was given a zoning bonus, and then we did an off-site inclusionary affordable project with Friend's House, who's sitting in the front row right here. Thanks, Annie. And it was the first one that was 100% privately funded through the inclusionary program. So that was very exciting. It's been a very successful project, and we're excited to do more of those as well. The initial implementation phase of the housing plan on the ground is going to be about changing the term sheet. So this summer, we're going to spend some time looking at the term sheets for affordable housing projects across the board, not just the supportive housing loan program. And we don't have those numbers, obviously. We'll launch those in the fall. But what we do know is some of the, mission and drive behind those are going to be additional leveraging, as we've talked about. Incentives for reducing costs. So there will be places where we just want to drop the hammer and reduce costs by fiat, but I think it'll work a lot better where we can create some incentives within our program so that if there is a cost savings, then that cost savings is spread across to a variety of different stakeholders so that there's an incentive for everybody to do that. Additional income diversity in our projects. We've always kept the non-homeless units in supportive housing loan programs strictly to 60% of AMI, but actually there is not necessarily a reason, especially on the 9% deals, to do that. So we may explore some more additional income diversity and more middle income bands in our 9% program. and then incorporate homeless units throughout HPD programs. We have historically had set-asides in HPD's affordable housing projects, but they've been so reliant on the Section 8 program that in difficult times for the Section 8 program, we end up waiving those restrictions. So what we want to do for the housing plan is, yes, we will do some of those projects that will require Section 8 and we'll rely on that, but there's a couple of other ways to do it. One is we can just underwrite to it and provide additional capital and reduce the debt to allow a lower income tier. Or we can do income averaging, where we allow some higher income units in exchange for some much lower income units, and that way we don't have every single unit be in that tiny 57 to 60% AMI band. So that'll benefit New Yorkers as a whole, but it'll also be particularly targeted to homeless families. Longer term affordability, that's going to be another goal of the term sheet changes and the housing plan. Increasing focus on our enforcement mortgages for city-owned sites, and then also what happens at year 30. 30 years seemed like a long time, but now that some of our projects are headed in that direction, there's an increasing focus on what happens in the 30th year, the 50th year, the 60th year, both in terms of what the check-ins are going to be for the financial health of the project, and also what incentives we can provide to make sure that these projects are supportive housing for even longer than 30 years, so we don't lose those by as they expire.